Assalamu alaikum everyone. You're watching SamiSpeaks. My name is Sami T, Naseem. And yeah, it's good to be back with you all again for our second episode on this beautiful start to the week, alhamdulillah. We've got a lot to go over today, a lot to discuss. We're going to be talking about Sami Hamdi. He's been recently detained. I believe it was about a week ago now, maybe a week and a half ago. So he's been detained. His court date is the 10th of November, I believe. So, you know, quite a while away from now. Some saying he is being held in inhumane conditions. He's feeling unwell. We're going to discuss that. And it's quite a nuanced take because I'm not someone who has always agreed with Sami Hamdi. But nevertheless, he hasn't been detained because of some of the grievances I have with him. But he's been detained because he's been going on a speaking tour, essentially, bashing Israel, criticizing Israel, and rightly so, right? We're going to be talking about that. We're also going to be discussing Sudan, the Sudanese civil war that's been going on since 2023 now. It was unbeknownst to me, I must say. So what I did is I did my research, I did my due diligence, and I'm going to give you a timeline of sorts, and then I'm going to give you my thoughts also. But what is our featured story? Our featured story today is the topic of the New York City Mayoral Election, right? This is a big one. This is actually tomorrow, right? So it's very timely. The New York City Mayoral Election is tomorrow. Stateside will probably get the results here in the UK in the early hours on Wednesday. And I'll be honest with you, I'm actually quite excited, right? A year ago today, we were, well, some of us at least, were looking forward to the presidential election. And I'd say I'm pretty good at this game of predicting what will happen. So I'm going to give you my predictions. I'm also going to go over the candidates. And I think we should start with where I started paying attention to this race, right? To this mayoral race. So let's talk about this, right? So essentially, right, we've got 3 candidates currently, but before that, before the Democratic primary, we had some Democratic debates. That's where I started paying attention to this, right? There was a massive clip that went out, it went viral and such. Loads of people were talking about it. And you had Zohran Mamdani, you had Andrew Cuomo, and then you had all the other Democratic candidates, right? And it was a debate, right? So the interviewers, the journalists, the moderators asked each candidate on stage, if you were lucky enough to become mayor, if you were to visit a foreign country, what would be the first one you would visit, right? So they asked that question to Andrew Cuomo. I believe he's the first to answer. And he says, I would visit Israel, right? I would visit Israel, especially at a time like now. Anti-Semitism is rampant. I would visit Israel. That's fine. No worries. Okay, that's his prerogative, right? He says Israel. And then the next candidate, I don't know his name. Next candidate, I would personally, myself, I'd visit Israel. Okay, that's fine. You know, 2 for 2, but I'm sure the next guy is going to be a bit more creative, right? So the guy says, the next guy, I'd visit Ukraine. All right. But I'd also visit Israel. Oh, okay. So everyone's saying Israel on stage, right? Zohran's at the end. They ask Zohran. He says, personally, what I would do is I would focus on the 5 boroughs in this city, and I would stay in New York, right? And I'll put my grievances aside with the grievances I have with Zohran, which I'm going to discuss later. That was a perfect response, okay? Talk about, and he isn't really anything special, Zohran. He's a socialist, right? But he's very different. Okay, he is not the same, whereas the people he's going up against are all the same, right? Even Curtis Silver, the Republican, he's very much your cookie cutter Republican, and Andrew Cuomo is not a cookie cutter Democrat. He seems more like a Republican, right? So this is what I'm saying. We've got a Andrew Cuomo, we've got a Zohran Mamdani, and then we've got a Curtis Silver. We've got 3 candidates, right? If you look at the polling and if you look at what people are reporting as of today, but it's been like this for months now, Zohran has a massive lead, right? And they're saying, the Cuomo camp are saying that if Curtis Silva would have dropped out then it'd be very likely that Andrew would either come close to winning or win, right? Not by a significant margin, but winning at that. And what I would say to that is, what are you talking about? First and foremost, you're not even acting, and I'm not saying like, oh, you're a Democrat, that means it's good. I'm just saying you're not acting like a Democrat. You're running as a Democrat. He's saying he wants to slash taxes. He's saying he wants to cut crime. I agree, right? No worries. But that's not what Democrats campaign for. That's not the party lining. That's not what Democrats have always done. Now, Zohran is more, socialistic. He's saying he wants to not put more police on the streets. That's what Cuomo's saying. He's saying that he wants to, bring taxes up for the top 1%, right? So top 1%, right now they're paying 50%. 50%, what a joke. But they're paying 50%. He's saying he wants to bring it up to 52%, right? And that would make, millions and millions of dollars. And then he wants to make buses fast and free. And that's how he's going to pay for it. And all of this, right? Very socialistic. That's fine. No worries. But my main grievance with Zohran is not what he's saying, but the fact that he's identifying as a Muslim, right? He's saying, I am a proud Muslim. I am the first Muslim mayor on the precipice, the first Muslim mayoral candidate on the precipice of becoming mayor, right? He won't stop talking about Islam. He won't stop calling himself a Muslim. And yet he is doing a lot of things that are antithetical to Islamic values and Islamic traditions, right? I mean, for one, I saw him the other day. I didn't see him myself, but there was posts coming out that he was at a gay bar, right? He was at a gay bar, late last week. He's out there protesting and saying he's for LGBTQ, all of this, right? So, and if you're a Democrat, you can do that. You do what you want. But the fact that you're calling yourself a Muslim, you're running as a Muslim, and yet you're encouraging this type of stuff. Now, he's 12 a Shia, so, that's a conversation in and of itself, but frankly, it doesn't really relate here. We've got a Zohran Mamdani that's calling himself a Muslim, and I would contest that, frankly, right? Because of some of the things that he's... And I've heard some other Muslim people who are saying, you know what, it doesn't matter what he's doing, it doesn't matter, how spiritual he is and all of this. The only thing that matters is that he is, representing Muslims, and he'll make it easier for Muslim representation. I don't think so, right? We should not be diluting our faith, right? We should not be being apologetic over our faith, right? We shouldn't be being any of these things. We are talking about a New York City, right, who was very anti-Islam just after 9/11, right? When the Twin Towers came down in Lower Manhattan 20 years ago, the anti-Muslim hate was humongous, right? It's never been, I would argue, it was never as big, and it even came to the UK also, So we've come so far since then. Why are we trying to be apologetic? Why are we apologizing over our faith? And this is what it seems like this Zohran is doing. But nevertheless, that's my main grievance with him. What I will say is that the election is tomorrow, and I would predict, right, and I'm very confident in saying that Zohran isn't just going to win. I think it's going to be a landslide, right? I think it's going to be a landslide. I remember this time last year, I was speaking to my politics teachers, right? Because I did A-level politics, and I was telling them that Trump isn't just going to win, it's going to be a landslide. He is going to win massively. He's going to win all 7 swing states. He's going to win the popular vote, which is a rarity amongst Republicans. Republicans never win the popular vote. And what happened? That happened, right? He won the popular vote. He won all 7 swing states, and it was a massive victory for the MAGA base. And I think the same thing is going to happen, because at the end of the day, it's a tide turning. We're seeing what Trump's doing in office now. Some of it good, some of it, well, a lot of it bad. And people have had enough, and hasn't even been a year. So now people want to try out the other side, right? This has always happened in politics. Now people want to try out Zohran. They want to see what he's about. And I believe that come 2 days' time here in the UK, we will see that Zohran won massively. I think Andrew Cuomo is going to have a massive fail. And I hope he does also, because this is a guy. I mean, I remember Zohran just did a podcast on I think it was the Andrew Schultz podcast. I think it's called Flagrant. And he got 800,000 views in 24 hours. A massive amount of views in 24 hours. And the Andrew Cuomo guy, he went on, I think it was one of the Paul brothers podcast. And he didn't even scratch 100,000 views, right? In 24 hours. This guy is irrelevant, frankly. He's going to do a lot worse than people think, than people are predicting. Those are my takes and what I predict to happen tomorrow in the New York City mayoral election. Sami Hamdi, however, has been detained, right? He has been detained. Now, this guy is a British, I think he's Tunisian, journalist who was obviously operating in the UK. He was doing a lot of dawah and a lot of political activism in the UK. And he went to the US, he got a visa, he applied for the visa. He was successful in his application. And by the way, that is quite, rare to see. You wouldn't think the US would grant him a visa under these conditions at the moment with Israel and such, but they did, right? They did. And, he went on a massive tour in the US. This was even before Trump was, won the election. So he was doing this under Biden. He went on a massive tour. He was talking about the genocide. He was talking about the atrocities and all of this. And he was also saying some stuff I didn't agree with, right? But that doesn't really matter, and it doesn't really relate also, because he hasn't been detained because of that. He's been detained by the Homeland Security. I remember reading the tweet, and they said they don't support terrorism, he's a national security threat and all of this. Now, if this had come from the Israeli Homeland Security, whatever they call themselves there, the equivalent to the Homeland Security in Israel, and he was doing his political speaking tour in Israel, it would make sense, right? Because Israel wants to advance their own interests, and they don't really want anyone to hear anti-Israel stuff and all of this. So that would make sense. But we're talking about the US here. And we're not just talking about any old country. We're talking about a country that prides itself in freedom of speech, that prides itself in freedom of expression, freedom of political expression, freedom of religious expression, and all of this. And yet what we're seeing here is we're seeing Sami Hamdi being detained, right? Not because of anything other than him criticizing Israel, him speaking against Israel, him speaking for Palestinian rights and such. And because of this, the Trump admin has detained him. Right now, some are saying he's in very inhumane conditions. Some are also saying, I think his father said, that he is feeling very unwell. He isn't feeling great, which is terrible, And this is a dangerous precedent that's been setting, because what we're seeing here is, and the most ironic part is that I remember Sami Hamdi about a year ago telling or advising Muslim brothers and sisters to vote for Trump, saying vote for Trump because that's a vote against the Biden admin. And the Biden admin is who started this. So vote for Trump, that is a vote against Biden. And now the very same admin he was saying vote for has now detained him, right? Has now arrested him. Now his trial date, his court date is the 10th of November, right? So it's the 10th of November. Today is the 3rd of November. So we're talking another week in inhumane conditions. This is terrible, man. This is terrible. Why? Not because he's a terrorist. He hasn't committed a crime, right? He hasn't committed a crime. He hasn't been tried of a crime. He hasn't been charged. All he's done is used his mouth to speak up against the genocide in Israel, to speak up against the atrocities that Israel has committed for 2 years now. And he's been detained for that, right? What is this precedent that's being set? And it wasn't always like this, right? I believe we've hit a very dangerous and scary time where the conversations and the debate and the dialogue that's happening around not even just Palestine, but Islam as a whole, right? It's just become so aggressive, and, you know, they've just got their guard up all the time. You know what I mean? And even good, like I remember about 2 years ago now, 3 years ago, something like that, there was a video of a podcaster, PBD, right? Businessman Patrick Bet-David. And he was sat down with Charlie Kirk, right? We discussed Charlie Kirk last week. He was sat down with Charlie Kirk, and they were discussing these midterm election results, right? So PBD, he sat down with Charlie Kirk, and they're talking about the fact that in 2018, the midterms in the United States, 17% of Muslims voted Republican, right? 17%. Fast forward to 2022 midterms, only 4 years later, that 17% goes to 28%, right? 28% of Muslims vote Republican, okay? PBD's like, that's 11% increase. It's massive. Charlie Kirk's like, that's profound, right? And PBD starts to talk about how, you know, how we can put our differences aside, Christianity and Islam, and how we can work together, right? We can work together. We can put our differences aside. We can put the Prophet Muhammad والسلام, and the Jesus and the differences there, the theological differences, and focus more on the similarities we have in terms of morality and all of that. He was saying this 3-4 years ago, however long. And if you look at that same Patrick Bet-David today, and some of the rhetoric, frankly, that he is spewing, right? He's never been, I'm sorry to say, but it's true, because PBD is someone I've been listening to for some time now. He has never been as anti-Muslim, right? As Islamophobic, frankly. That's what it is. I'm not here to beat around the bush. That's what he's being, right? And I've had to stop listening to him because of that. Because it, honestly, I'm not saying it is true, but it seems like he's being bought, he's been paid for, or at least he's being told what to do, right? And seeing that Netanyahu interview kind of cemented it for me, right? And these were the conversations that were happening before Trump got elected. Trump got elected, and they stopped having these types of conversations. They no longer want to build bridges to us. PBD in that same clip was saying, stiff arm to Muslims, stiff arm to Muslims. Why can't we just get along, form an alliance with one another, focus on our similarities instead of our differences? And now, he's doing the exact same thing he was criticizing back then, right? And the same thing's happening in the UK. I don't know who's funding this, but ever since this genocide, frankly, everybody's become so combative and aggressive and all of this stuff. And we can see this no better than in what's happening in the United States. I remember Mahmoud Khalid was another guy. I think his visa was revoked. And then a Boston judge, and you know, Republicans will call it an activist judge, but still, it's a judge. A judge is a judge. And the judge called it unconstitutional, right? And it is unconstitutional. It very much goes against the First Amendment. Marco Rubio, Little Marco, as Trump would call him, he would say that, you know, they are on visas, they're not citizens here, so they're not entitled to the same rights that US citizens would have. It's a terrible argument, my friend. I'm sorry to say. It's a terrible argument. What do you want to promote here? Do you want to promote freedom of speech, freedom of expression, or do you only want to promote it when, what's being said is what you agree with? So it's a difficult one because, Sami Hamdi was someone who was in favor of Erdogan in Turkey and Imran Khan in Pakistan. But when it comes to like Saudi and all of this, he was very much going against Saudi and the UAE and all of that. I don't know. I disagree with him on that because it just seems very counterintuitive, very hypocritical, frankly. But even so, he should not have been detained. He's being detained for what he's saying, for his speech, and not because of that. And therefore, it is wrong. It must not happen. It must be condemned. And I hope that he gets out very safe. I hope Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants him shifa and brings him health, brings him back to his wife, and I believe he has children also, back to the UK, right? He's even said, his wife said in a BBC interview, he wants to come back to the UK. So let him come back to the UK, right? There's no point keeping him in inhumane conditions because it's just bad press for the Trump admin, frankly. Sudan is in a state of war, right? Civil war, actually. So it's a civil war. It's a massive conflict. It's a massive crisis that is happening. And as I said at the start, this was something that was unbeknownst to me, right? I wasn't very much aware of what was going on in Sudan. Obviously, I had friends who would bring it up from time to time, but it was only until a good friend of mine spoke to me about it and briefly explained what was going on. And I was horrified. So I researched it. I had a look at what was going on. And why don't we go through a quick timeline? Because a lot of people say, oh, so this war was, so it started, what, April 2023? No, it actually started a lot earlier than that. We have a overthrowing of the president, Omar al-Bashir, right? So he is overthrown in 2019 by two armies, right? So you have the Sudanese Armed Forces, the SAF. They're sort of the main military and army in Sudan. And they work together with the Rapid Support Forces, the RSF, to overthrow this president, this long-running president, who was very unpopular, who was accused himself of very atrocious accusations, including genocide, including terrible things, right? So this wasn't, I'm not saying this was a good guy, but he was overthrown, right? And then in 2021, there was a military coup, another overthrowing of the then government. And then you had the Rapid Support Forces and the Sudanese Armed Forces come together as essentially the governing force of Sudan. It was the Sudanese Armed Forces Al-Burhan, who was sort of the president, if you like, the de facto president of Sudan at that point after the military coup. And then you have Sami T, who was the sort of, deputy president under Al-Burhan of the Sudanese, of the Rapid Support Forces, right? So this happens in 2021. It was very unpopular, right? So they overthrow Omar al-Bashir in 2019. That is something that I believe was quite popular. People in the streets were calling for civilian rule now. And obviously a military coup happens in 2021. These are now the sort of leaders of Sudan, these generals of the army, of the two armies, respected armies. And the citizens do not like that, right? So they do not like that. They're not a fan of that. And the Rapid Support Forces leader, Sami T, did not, want to be associated with Al-Burhan. He did not want to be associated with him. And he saw that he was becoming very unpopular. So this is where he started to pretend and started to act like he's all for democracy, right? He's all for civilian rule. He's sort of this embodiment of democracy. And they start to, instead of being allies, right, they start to become enemies, right? This is in 2021. Tensions grew. Accusations are being thrown around. And then in 2023, after some failed negotiations where the Sudanese Armed Forces wanted to bring the Rapid Support Forces, fold them into one army, right? Sami T did not like that, right? He was saying this is terrible. This is going to, I'm going to lose a lot of my power that I have now currently. It's going to weaken the military prowess of the Rapid Support Forces. It's going to remove our military and, our autonomy, frankly, of the army. So he's very much against that, right? The Ali Burhan wants it to happen in the next year or two, whereas the other guy, he wants it to happen in 10 years or more, right? Because he wants to remain the sort of powerful guy, have all this power and all of this, and if it's folded into one, he has no power anymore. So he's very much against that, right? He doesn't like that. Those negotiations failed, and then in April of 2023, there is some strikes that happen on a Sudanese armed forces base, and then they're just at each other from then till now. Now, from then till now, what we've saw, right, this is the worst part, right, is we've saw, and this is a conservative figure, but we've saw around 150,000 deaths from April 2023 to now. 150,000 deaths. We have saw 500,000 dead as an indirect result to this war because of malnutrition and that sort of stuff. Disgusting. And we have saw millions displaced, millions of refugees as a result of this war. And frankly, it's a genocide, is what people are calling it. This rapid support forces have been seen killing innocent civilians, innocent men, innocent women, innocent children, non-combatants, right? And this is what I wanted to discuss, is that what have we become as an ummah, right? We have become a shell of our former selves, of our glory days, of our golden age, the Islamic golden age, how we used to fight, right, with integrity and with ethics and with morality. And now, right, we are killing non-combatants. This is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam completely prohibited this. He completely prohibited the killing of non-combatants. He completely outlawed all of this unethical garbage that's going on, that we're seeing, right? He prohibited all of this. You must have the correct niyyah in fighting, right? In war, in a state of war, the correct intention. And yet, what are we fighting for today? We are fighting for human desire. We are fighting for not Islamic reasons, but political and economical reasons, right? These are not reasons to fight. Okay? These are not just reasons to fight. There's no justice going on here. If anything, there's injustice that's going on, right? The Rapid Support Forces, Hamdi T, has been accused of, very much contributing a lot more to the death toll than the Sudanese armed forces. Some even saying they're paid by the UAE. I'm not sure whether that's credible. But what I will say for sure is that Hamdi T is not, coming to, wanting to come to Sudan and bring the Sharia or bring morality or bring Islam, right? All he wants to do is make sure he's the only individual with power on Sudanese soil, right? It's disgusting, right? It is absolutely terrible. He's no better than a Netanyahu. He is no better. We talk about Palestine. It's not about comparing it. It's not about saying one's inconsequential and one is more consequential. Lives are at stake, just like I said last week. Lives are at stake. Just like lives were at stake in Palestine, lives are at stake here, okay? And 70,000 have been killed in Palestine since the October the 7th attacks. 70,000. We're looking at 150,000 in Sudan, and that's a conservative estimate. Some say a lot more. 500,000 due to malnutrition, right? This is disgraceful. This is terrible. Why are they dying over malnutrition? They are dying over malnutrition because these guys have no care for livestock, for resources. The Prophet completely prohibited this because there are many people who depend on these resources and they are being destroyed through heinous acts. Okay? What would the Prophet think? And it goes back to Zuhran as well. What would the Prophet think of a guy like Zuhran? Do you think he would approve of someone like that? And this is why I must, I can't be a fan of someone like Zuhran. And what we're seeing in Sudan, we must condemn also. And what we're seeing in Gaza, we must condemn. It's terrible times, I must say. But that's the end of today's episode. We've gone over a lot. We've gone over it in a beautiful way. Alhamdulillah, I must say. I will see you next week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.